Okay, moving on to the next division and next segment of our show that we will be talking about today. That is the NFC South. And let's start asking some questions. So to start off, my first question with the NFC South is this. We all know that Drew Brees was in the news the other day after his comments regarding the American flag. And I know, the people who are saying that Drew Brees should retire, God, I just don't think that's legit. I don't think you could really say that. But at the same time, I do think it is a little bit of a concern to wonder, hey, what is the Saints locker room going to be like next year? What is the vibe? What is the atmosphere going to be in the Saint locker room next year? And for the people that have listened to this show before, you guys know my opinion from a pure football perspective before this incident went down and everything that happened in New Orleans with the Saints last year. You guys know, I love Drew Brees as a player. I think he's had a great career. But at the same time, I don't know, man. This could be an issue that could arouse, it could bring some tension, especially when Drew Brees is playing in a locker room with Cam Jordan, with Malcolm Jenkins, with Michael Thomas, guys like that. And I haven't really done much talk on the whole Drew Brees topic yet. I mean, look, I just don't think he meant anything malicious by it. And I just think he needed to be a little more aware of what he was saying, especially the time he said it, in regards to everything that's been going on over the last couple weeks. But when you look at the New Orleans Saints, I still think they're one of the 3 or 4 most talented teams in the league. I just don't really trust Sean Payton as a head coach. And I don't know, it's just going to be interesting to see what happens with this New Orleans Saint team. You guys also know that I really don't trust this team in the playoffs, man. And that's my next question for the Saints for this upcoming season. Can this team finally get the job done in the playoffs? Because here's the thing. Sean Payton, everyone acts and treats him like a god, and I get it. He's not a bad coach. But at the same time, dude, this guy has had a healthy Hall of Fame quarterback for the past 11 years, and he hasn't even been able to get to a Super Bowl. People, rightfully so, talk about Drew Brees and Sean Payton in the same conversation as Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. And I understand why. Both those guys are very good. But when you look at it from a pure resume perspective, I don't know, man. I just don't really know how Drew Brees and Sean Payton are in that class when all they've really done is gone to 1 Super Bowl. And I understand Drew Brees also, he has all the passing records in the world, and, he's a great quarterback. But the reason why he's not over guys like Brady and even, Joe Montana, other quarterbacks like that throughout the league, and same with Sean Payton, and same with that overall coach-quarterback combination, I don't know, man. I just think the New Orleans Saints don't get enough hate from the national media based on everything that they've done in the playoffs, really since they won that Super Bowl, whether it was the Marshawn Lynch beast mode game, whether it was the game when the missed pass interference call, whether it was this year against the Minnesota Vikings. And you guys know that I always like to say, in terms of that missed pass interference call, yeah, it was bad, but the Saints still had the ball late in overtime, or to start off overtime, and still couldn't find a way to win, and they couldn't punch the ball into the end zone after that PI call. So that's my thing with the Saints, man. I just think they're a team that I no longer trust in the playoffs after everything that's gone down over the last couple of years. Kirk Cousins came into your building and just really lit you up. I just don't really know if I could trust you and your team as a legitimate contender when those things are happening. The Saints, once again, definitely have the three or four most talented rosters in the National Football League, but at the same time, I just still don't really trust these guys to get the job done. And that brings us to the next team I want to talk about today, and that is the team that has been in the news a lot so far this offseason, and that would be Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers, we all know the story. They were a very fascinating team last year due to the fact that they had a quarterback that just couldn't stop turning the ball over. But still, with that being said, they were competitive. They showed some signs of promise. And the question that everyone is wondering is, good quarterback play going to put the Buccaneers over the top? And my question is, how good is Tom Brady? I know that there is no better guy in terms of in between the ears than Tom Brady. What he's done in New England throughout his career has been absolutely incredible. And there's no doubt about it, he is the best quarterback of all time. But I'm specifically talking about 2020 Tom Brady. how good is 2020 Tom Brady? Because deep down, for me at least, I believe that if you do put Tom Brady on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that last year, as I said, just drive after drive after drive, their defense was put in very tough positions just over and over again. And even though Tom Brady may not have the volume and he may not throw the ball as far and as long as Jameis Winston does, I do think, once again, at least me personally, that the limited turnovers, the way less turnovers, maybe that can ultimately help the Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. But I think we could all also agree about this. The last time we saw Tom Brady on a football field, he didn't really look that good. I remember him walking off the field after that game against the Tennessee Titans, and yeah, it really wasn't looking too good. And he was not good throughout the season last year, and there could be reasons for that. We've spoke about it before. The Patriots' weapons were awful. The Patriots' offensive line was awful. The Buccaneers, when you go to play over there, you're definitely going to be a little more improved in both of those areas. Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. However, what I will also say is this. The Buccaneers, they still have to build a culture. And bringing in Gronk is going to help. Bringing in Tom Brady is obviously going to help. But Tom Brady is going to be playing with these new guys and players that he's never really played with before. He's going to be playing in a place that he's never played in before. So that's my first question for the Buccaneers. How good exactly is Tom Brady? Moving on to my next question on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How good is their defense? I don't know if it's great. I don't know if it's awful. I think it's somewhere in the middle. But I do think last year the Buccaneers defense was kind of they weren't really given a fair shot because, once again, they were just put in so many unfair positions. My next question is, if Tom Brady, and I think we know this, he's not going to throw 30 interceptions, right? He's not even going to throw 20 interceptions, most likely. So my next question for the Buccaneers is this. If they get that quarterback play, right, is their defense good enough to at least put them in a position to win some games, get some clutch stops down the stretch, beat some of the best teams in football? You guys also know that the first week of the season, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers actually go on a trip to New Orleans Sunday 4:30. Once again, first week of the season. Let's see how exactly the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense does in that game, Let's see how good they are. Because last year, they were one of the harder units to judge because they did show some promise. They have some nice guys. I like Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh along that defensive line. They also have some young linebackers I'm huge fans of. They have Devin Bush, the kid from LSU, Devin White, excuse me. And they also have Kendall Beckwith, who's a nice young linebacker I like. Levante David's a guy that has been there for a while. And Todd Bowles running that defense. He's a pretty good defensive coordinator. So it's going to be interesting to see how exactly everything goes down in Tampa. But those are my questions on the Buccaneers. All right, moving on to the next team in the NFC South I wanted to talk about with you guys today, and that would be Matt Rule and the brand new look Carolina Panthers. And the Panthers are another team that I feel like I'm having a little bit of trouble breaking down because technically the Panthers spent some big money on a quarterback this past offseason, and we're going to get to him in a little bit, don't you worry. But at the same time, this Carolina Panther team has lost a lot. They've lost Luke Kuechly, they've lost Thomas Davis, they've lost Charles Johnson. It's been a couple of years now, but they lose Greg Olsen. They lose Cam Newton. They've basically lost every key contributor from that team that made it to the Super Bowl just a couple years ago. They also lose James Bradbury, who is one of their better players on defense, and they lose their head coach in Ron Rivera. So clearly, the Carolina Panthers are starting from scratch and going with something new. They also gave their coach a big-time contract, and for a guy that hasn't coached a game in the NFL yet, I'm fascinated to see, all right, is this guy going to be able to live up to the hype? Because historically, sometimes college football coaches coming from college going directly into the NFL hasn't necessarily always worked out. So that's my first question when I look at the Carolina Panthers. You have a lot of change. What direction exactly are you going in? Are you going to be trying to win this season? Are you going to try to win for the future? And this is actually a good transition into my next question that I wanted to talk about, and that's regarding the Carolina Panthers quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater. And I have some pretty strong feelings about Teddy Bridgewater as a player. And before I make them, I just wanted to start off by saying this. I respect Teddy Bridgewater, you know? The fact that he had that injury and came back to the National Football League, and he is now one of the 32 starting quarterbacks in the National Football League. You guys know that is not something every player should ever have to deal with. But at the same time, I just don't think Teddy Bridgewater really deserved the contract he got. I'm sorry. I think Teddy Bridgewater is one of the 10 worst starting quarterbacks in the NFL, and he really is not worth that money. Does he deserve credit for the job he did last year with the New Orleans Saints? Absolutely. The fact that he came in on short notice after Drew Brees got hurt and led them to whatever it was, a 4-0 record, going into Chicago and winning, going into Seattle and winning, all that good stuff, he deserves credit for that. But what I also will say is this. At the same time, if you kind of similar to the Tennessee Titans, and we were talking about them earlier, when you really watch Teddy Bridgewater and how exactly the New Orleans Saints were winning those games last year, I think you're going to kind of realize that, all right, this guy wasn't really the main reason why this team was winning all of these games. I think you'll kind of realize that. But at the same time, I think Carolina did a nice job surrounding him with the best weapons they could. They have arguably the best running back in the league in Christian McCaffrey and his brand new contract, so he should be ready to light up the league for the second year in a row. They also have a young receiver in DJ Moore that is looking like he's going to break out. They bring in Robbie Anderson from the New York Jets. So that's one thing that I'm kind of fascinated about with Carolina, is that once again, it all just goes back to, like, I don't know what direction they're really trying to go in. Because at first, it's like, all right, you have Matt Rule, and even though he's a first-year coach, you paid him a boatload of money, you gave him a 7-year contract, maybe you're just hoping, all right, let's just see what this guy could do with this team for the future of the franchise. But at the same time, Carolina, if they're paying Teddy Bridgewater that much money, especially at the stage where he is in his career, I do kind of wonder, like, is Carolina trying to win now? Because if they think Teddy Bridgewater could be a difference maker at quarterback, maybe they can. They have Christian McCaffrey. They have DJ Moore. And I think Carolina is one of those teams that could either end up at 8-8. Maybe they could end up at 5-11. Who knows? But I just don't really know exactly what direction the Panthers are going in. And then moving on to the fourth and final team I'm going to be talking about today in the NFC South, that would be the Atlanta Falcons. And I feel like the Atlanta Falcons are a team that always does find themselves in the news. When you look at this Falcons team, right, I think on paper, there's no reason why this team, once again, shouldn't be in the playoffs next year, especially with that added 7th team. But my first question for the Falcons is, how much time does Dan Quinn have? Last year, the Falcons were a weird team because they started the season 1-7, and people thought Dan Quinn should be fired. He wasn't, weirdly enough. And everyone was like, all right, this organization is incompetent. They're also the team that blew that big lead in the Super Bowl. Let's just forget about them. There's no point. But at the same time, what you have to realize is this. The Atlanta Falcons ended their season very well last year. They were able to go on the road to the NFC champion San Francisco 49ers and beat them. They also, played really well down the stretch. They finished the season, I believe it was 6-2. They had a road win over the New Orleans Saints. So the Atlanta Falcons, they have the talent, and on paper, they could be pretty good. And especially when you look at how the way last season ended, maybe they turn that momentum in 2020, maybe they turn that into some positive momentum. But at the same time, what I will say is this. Like, how can you trust Dan Quinn? If the Falcons start off their season 1-3, 1-4, which they did last year, I know their first game of the season is against a very good team in the Seattle Seahawks, then, like, what exactly do you do with this guy? I think you got to let him go, right? Ever since Kyle Shanahan left the Atlanta Falcons franchise and that team totally fell apart and blew their lead in the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots, the Atlanta Falcons as a team just haven't been the same. And that's where it kind of hits me, where I say to myself, all right, Dan Quinn probably just isn't that good of a coach, because it's also only been 2 years since the Falcons made the playoffs. Like, they've only been bad for really the last 2 years. So if Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, now that Todd Gurley's there, want to round up the boys back together and say, all right, it's time to win, They can definitely do that, but they haven't done it over the last couple years as well. So we'll see what happens with that. And then my last and final question for the Atlanta Falcons is, could Todd Gurley be a playmaker? Devonta Freeman's play has declined over the last couple years, so I think most people do really wonder, maybe a reason why the Falcons struggled a little bit last year was because of their running game. And they bring in a guy from Georgia, Todd Gurley, and a lot of times coming home does, make you play better. You feel a little more comfortable. But at the same time, the Rams are literally paying Todd Gurley to play for another team. They don't think he's good. They think he's so bad that they're like, all right, we don't want you on our team, so we're going to pay you to play for another team. And I wonder, could this guy turn it back? Because only 2 years ago, the first couple games, this guy was one of the 2 or 3 best running backs in the National Football League. There's no doubt about it. He was awesome down the stretch, and he was a big reason why the Rams were so good, especially during the regular season over the past 2 years. But I think you've kind of been able to realize this dude just hasn't been 100% healthy. And he's really struggled over the last year or two. I think he's had some long-term impact, to his injured areas. And I'm not really expecting him off the top to do anything that productive with Atlanta. But at the same time, he has Matt Ryan. He has Julio Jones. Maybe I'm wrong. So we'll see. But those are my questions for the NFC South.